Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I'm Flora speaking out. Yeah, my mind's going back about 90 years right now to when I was still a very young child, and I would catch a cold if you so much as looked at me. And often they'd morph into long ear infections, bronchitis, usual childhood diseases. Well, in earlier talks, I've told you what the average sick room looked like about 90 years ago, and I'm not going to go into that again. But one bright side of it was the convalescence, when fever was down, the pain over, and then was the time to play with my toys on the bed or read some wonderful books. Obviously, there was no television, there were no video games, no smartphones. Back 90 years ago, the average household had one radio in the house and one telephone in the house, and they certainly weren't in my bedroom. But I had books, and there was one book I especially loved. It was a book of poetry by Robert Louis Stevenson, written in 1885, called A Child's Garden of Verses, an enchanting book of poetry from the point of view of a child who, recovering in bed and playing with toys on the bedspread, and a child's reaction to having to get up in the winter when it was still dark and go to bed in the summer when it was still light. A child's taken all kinds of things. I love that book. But it was not until I was older, at least in my teens, that I discovered with a bit of shock that 1 year after Stevenson published his book of children's poetry, in 1886, 1 year later, he published what has become one of the classic horror stories of all time. It's become so famous that many movies have been made of it. It's become part of our language, part of our parlance. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And you know the story probably. The benevolent healer, the doctor, experimenting with certain chemicals, finds there's a way he can release his dark self. And he finds it increasingly intoxicating to feel that sense of power he hadn't felt before, the sense of fun going down the street, this time with a brutish face, striding down the street, pushing people off in the sidewalk, hurting people, eventually murdering people. You know, there's one thing worse than a masked evil face, and that is an unmasked evil face. Faces are fascinating. Ancient civilizations all over the world found them fascinating. The face, for example, on the Sphinx there in Egypt 4,000 years ago. They still don't know what that mysterious face represents. Or the Roman god Janus, the two-faced god. One face in front, one face at the back. Sometimes a man or a woman, sometimes elderly and young, sometimes frowning, sometimes smiling, the two-faced god. And then, of course, the old Gorgon face, three sisters, one of whom was Medusa, her face, either so blindingly beautiful or so excruciatingly horrible, there were two schools of thought about that if you looked at that face, you would turn into stone forever. Yes, through the ages and every civilization, the face symbol, the symbol of our identity, or our various identities, and their impact on those around us. And an experience can be a face, for example. Recently, I watched again that movie came out, I think, in 1969, Apocalypse Now. Many of you have seen that horrifying movie, considered to be probably the most powerful movie in the Vietnam War. And there's a line in it that struck me this time very powerfully. Horror has a face. Horror has a face. Nations, communal bodies, take on a kind of facial identity. Nations take on a face to the world. Look, for example, at the beautiful, powerful monument in Mount Rushmore, South Dakota. The faces, they were carved there. Interestingly, that was completed, the four great faces, in 1941, the year that America had to go to war in the Second World War. They were the faces of very amazing, flawed men. The face of the man who helped form the Constitution. The face of the man who freed the slaves. The face of the man who freed us from obedience to the king. And the face of the man who honored and preserved parts of our great natural resources. These are the faces the world used to see when they thought of America. They thought of us as people very flawed indeed, just like those men on Mount Rushmore were flawed. Jefferson and Washington had slaves. Theodore Roosevelt, who started the National Park movement, he was a gung-ho leader in the Spanish-American War. Flawed faces, yes. But on the whole, the world saw us as the face of the healer, not the face of the destroyer. They thought of us as a face, a nation that could be trusted, at least to try to do the right thing in spite of all our mistakes and our flaws. The face of a nation that could be trusted to stand up for personal and national freedom, that would work on peace, at least try to, that would try to heal the hungry, a nation that was believed in the field of science, a face to be trusted on the whole. Some people thought of us as the hope of the free world. What face are we presenting now? It's the face of the brutish Hyde, the face of the Gorgon, the face of the bully, the face of those cruel to its own refugees that had a legal right to come here and be here. A face that threatens other nations. A face of greed. Turbulence. A face that has plunged the whole Middle East into another ghastly war of choice. You may remember that when, after Trump's first term, which was pretty ghastly, When Biden came in, the rest of the world, at least of the Western free world, breathed a sigh of relief. They said, America is back again. America is back again. Election night in 2024, the sense of the nightmare returning. The nation again into the hands of malice and lies. We delivered the nation again into thugs with the face of Mr. Hyde or the Gorgon. 10 times worse. Story of two statues. A statue 100 feet high, built 300 years before the Common Era on the island of Rhodes in the Aegean Sea, a Greek island. They erected a huge bronze statue, 100 feet tall, bestriding the harbor, of a warrior god holding a spear. It was called the Colossus of Rhodes. And it was part of one of the 7 wonders of the old world. It was destroyed centuries later by accumulations of earthquakes and tidal waves. We still remember that Colossus of Rhodes, that warrior god. And now I'm thinking of another statue built 2,200 years around there later. 1886. Interesting coincidence, that's the year Stevenson published Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, just discovered that. A gift from the French, a statue made of copper. The French had grown to admire and trust America for its constitution, its efforts, at least towards democracy, the fact we had freed slaves. And they had this amazing statue built, which was 115 feet tall, taller than the Colossus of Rhodes, and sent it to us as a gift. Statue of Liberty, of course. And the sculptor, for the face of the statue, modeled it after the face of his mother. You might say the exact opposite of the Gorgon. And this great statue holds a torch, a flame. And the 7 rays of light coming out of her crown stand for the 7 seas, the whole world, as a beacon to the world. And an amazing poem stands at the foot of that statue. Most of us know the last lines of that poem. I've quoted them to you before and you know them. But I had not known until recently how the poem opens. In their way, they're as powerful, the opening words, as the ending lines. And the poem is called The New Colossus, as over against the Colossus of Rhodes. And this is what Emma Lazarus, 1886, wrote, which is now engraved at the base. The opening lines. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-wash gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning. And her name, is Mother of Exiles. Mother of Exiles. As everyone knows, the last lines of the poem go on. The very last two lines. Give these the tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. True face, I believe it is. The world now looking at us with broken trust sees the Gorgon. People face. Mount Rushmore are our valid faces. It's a Statue of Liberty at New York Harbor, Mother of Exiles. Our face. And all of us try to make that our own individual faces. Now, as I leave you for this week, our truest face. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate that. See you next week.